Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on Doordarshan, India's national broadcaster, about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations, and India's involvement in shaping regional and global architectures to make it a safer and a more prosperous world. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking up a monumental connectivity project, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, that has just been announced by India and several partner countries. What is this corridor called IMEC, IMEC? What are its major implications? What are the national interests of the different parties involved in this transcontinental linkage initiative? And what will be the strategic impact of this on the world? These are the topics we are taking up, and to discuss this, let me introduce you to a very knowledgeable guest who is joining me in the studio, Dr. Swasti Rao. Dr. Swasti Rao is Associate Fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, a noted commentator and writer on international and geopolitical issues, especially those concerning Europe. Welcome back to Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaulia. It's a pleasure to be here again, indeed.
Dr. Rao, IMEC has been announced through a formal memorandum of understanding in India, in New Delhi, on the sidelines of G20 summit. Yeah. We have India, United States, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, France, Germany, Italy, and the European Union,
right.
all signatories.
Yes.
And then there are some transit countries which are supposed to be part of this mega, transcontinental linkage, including Jordan and Israel and so many others. So it's truly ambitious. It's something not seen at this scale since the Chinese announced their Belt and Road Initiative way back in 2013.
That's right.
And many are calling it a game changer in geo-economics. And I read President Biden at the inaugural in New Delhi saying that this is, a real big deal. Mm-hmm. So we'd like you to start by, sharing your thoughts on why these corridors and why they have become such a currency of contemporary international landscape, and why it's seen as so important for countries to be involved in these kinds of corridor projects that are primarily economic but also have other implications. So corridors and their importance, let's start with that.
Well, so I think you've already given a wonderful introduction as to what this corridor and who the signatories are, and there are transit countries. I think at the heart of it is the realization about the utility, about the economic and also the geopolitical, the geostrategic utility. So you can't just divorce these things, all these things go hand in hand of these corridors. I think the first mega country to realize the importance of such a thing was definitely China, which under Xi Jinping, announced this Belt and Road Initiative, then called the OBOR, and then of course eventually called the BRI. And then just going back a bit in the history is that of course one of the reasons why these connectivity projects are important is because they are able to tap the full potential of what globalized, of trade in a globalized world means. So in short, I think that is core to understanding that there are a very, very effective pathways of tapping on the potential of the globalized trade, and the way to do trade. That's one. But more importantly, Dr. Chaulia, I think that America had this realization of how important has BRI been, and especially to these developing countries and economies. And it was not in 2023. The work that you see in 2023 is basically coming after a lot of, I would say, bittersweet experiences that the US has had. The first time they launched something like that was in 2021 at the G7 summit. I think it was happening in England, and they came up with what is called the Build Back Better World Initiative.
B3W.
B3W, yes, by the Biden administration, where it was also somewhere in tune with the catchphrase that America is back. And it was a massive, infrastructure project, and it was supposed to raise about $40 trillion, etc. But again, because of the problems with respect to financing, because they could not de-risk the finance required for it properly, it got kind of shelved. Then last year, again at G7, now this time the 2022 G7 was happening in Germany, and also let me remind the viewers that the Ukraine war was already on at that time. And then they re-christened that B3W as the PGII, which is Partnership for Global Investment and Infrastructure. And under that, America once again sort of, with better worked out financing plans, etc., came up with this idea of developing economic corridors which are going to work on developing infrastructure in a more transparent, collaborative manner, and all over the world. And this is from where you get this understanding of what this, IMEC is all about, because America it's not really covering that geography, but America is the real force behind it, because it is somewhere coming from this direct PGII. It's one of the corridors, and America also has, similar corridors in South Africa. It's called the Lobito Corridor. It's, covering some African countries. It has similar projects running in the Latin American region. You have this now, which is now connected India, Middle East and Europe in a very unprecedented manner. So I think this is where you understand that. This is how you understand that.
And there is also the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is for east of, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific side. And Japan is a big player there. And what is interesting, I noted, Dr. Rao, was that there is some sense that this is a global network of corridors, so to say, because the Japanese Prime Minister was also there, Fumio Kishida, at the launch of the IMEC. So even though Japan is not part of IMEC, he was talking about the Bangladesh and and the Pacific Islands and all. Japan is also building corridors there, and it's linked to the IPEF. So it looks like there's some big global architecture if you take all of these together. And there's an attempt by, especially by democratic powers, led by the Western countries, to try and come up with an alternative to the Chinese. And there is that element. India, now coming to India, Dr. Rao, for us, we are part of IMEC, and IMEC starts with an I. So we are the point of origin. If you see the trade routes that are being projected for IMEC, it starts from western coast of India, from Kandla or from Mumbai, and then going all the way up to Hamburg in Germany, through road, rail, as well as ship and underwater cables and all kinds of. So it's a multimodal connectivity idea, and India is at the heart of it. So why? I mean, it's obvious that there will be economic benefits for India, and we are saying that maybe our engineering goods exports, our green energy exports, all these will get huge boosts, and it will transform into high economic dividends for India in terms of growth and jobs and foreign currency reserves and all those things. So far so good. But how would you put India, and why do you think they made India the central link for the Americans, the Europeans and the Gulf countries? For all of them, I think India is the big prize, isn't it? Like a huge market, fastest growing in the G20 economies, and therefore it had to be at the center of IMEC.
True. I mean, I would have little to disagree there. I think you've just hit the nail on the head, because of course India is a 1.4 billion strong population, an emerging market, a very fast growing economy, and no truly international economic plan can really work without the inclusion of India. So it's just a reiteration of this particular thing. Coming back to IMEC, I think it's important to note here that the first time somebody discussed about this connectivity of India and Europe through the Middle East, was actually one Professor Michael Tanchum, who was now with Harvard, but then he wrote a paper which was published by National University of Singapore that for the first time toyed with this idea, and he said that if you are able to come up with something like this, it is going to really give a boost by 40% of the trade and everything. So anyway, there is a lot of it is a project which is backed by a lot of academic research, backed by a lot of other diplomatic maneuvering, and India at the center, like you said. I think it's also important to understand that when you put an initiative like this with India at its center, it again becomes a reiteration of the fact that the global economic order is going to remain multipolar, because India has India has always stayed committed to multi-alignment. India has always pushed for a multipolarity in the world, and with this kind of a thing, because if you closely look at the players that are involved, starting from India, going to Middle East, I'm sure we're going to talk about Middle East as well. But for India, I mean, the only other way that we were able to tap those markets and go through that region was one, of course, we had the Chabahar connectivity through the to the Middle East through Iran, and the other was the International North-South Trade Corridor, which was through Russia and Iran, the INSTC. Yes.
And
Now
both these were risky
both these are risky
because of the Western sanctions.
Yeah,
and
so
all that.
they are susceptible to Western sanctions. They are susceptible to geopolitical upheavals. And for India, then, this is an alternative route. Now, by doing this, India is in no way shelving those projects, right?
Yeah.
That's already on. But this is something that is perhaps the, like it has all ingredients of making it a grand success. Let's put it this way. And then if you, at the heart of it is again a reiteration that India's economic imagination of the world remains multipolar. In fact, becomes, this imagination gets stronger. Okay, so it gives an alternate route to India. Now, that is a great thing because we have great relations with Saudi Arabia, with UAE. Let's also remember that Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these are now members of the BRICS as well,
Yes.
right? I mean, just a couple of months ago, they became members of the BRICS. So I think it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah. And viewers, it's not only an alternative to the Chabahar route and to the north-south corridor, but also to the traditional oceanic route of the across the Arabian Sea, which goes through the Suez Canal and via Egypt. Now, if you go directly through Persian Gulf, it actually reduces the time, and the Europeans were talking about how it will reduce the time for trade by 40% between India and Europe. So huge potential there. Viewers, I have a few comments by the US and Indian leaders at the launch of the IMEC, talking about its value and significance. So let's hear President Biden and Prime Minister Modi and watch this clip and then continue the discussion.
हमने ग्लोबल साउथ के अनेक देशों में एक विश्वसनीय पार्टनर के रूप में एनर्जी, रेलवे, वाटर, टेक्नोलॉजी पार्क्स जैसे क्षेत्रों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स इंप्लीमेंट किए। इन प्रयासों में हमने डिमांड ड्रिवन और ट्रांसपेरेंट अप्रोच पर विशेष रूप से बल दिया है।
And today I'm proud to announce that we've finalized a historic agreement for a new India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. As a key part of this corridor, we're going to invest in ships and rail that extends from India all the way to Europe, connected by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. Bridging ports across two continents, unlocking endless opportunities, including making it far easier to trade, export clean energy, expand access to reliable, clean electricity, lay cables that will connect communities and secure a stable internet, contributing to a more stable, more prosperous, and integrated Middle East.
So viewers, you heard snapshots of what the leaders of India and the United States, two key players in the IMEC initiative, talking about the endless opportunities that this presents. And Prime Minister Modi has also been talking about how it helps the youth of future generations to think bigger and to achieve greater things. So Dr. Rao, this whole idea that this is a grand initiative. I was reading that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has commented that this is the greatest cooperation project in history. So certainly the hype is there, and of course there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of implementing the vision, especially through investments for better transport linkages and all those things, and ports. Let's have for a moment now focus on the Gulf countries, which are in the middle. Right. Between India and Europe, in the center of this project, and they will be transit countries. And here there is, there's supposed to be railway networks connecting the Persian Gulf countries all the way up to the port of Haifa in Israel.
Yes.
From where it will again resume the maritime route to Europe.
To go to Europe.
So, and India has been in talks with our Gulf country partners for building these railways, and we have the prowess. We have done it in Africa, we've done it in many developing countries. Our railways minister Ashwini Vaishnav was saying that our railway technology as well as railway industrial abilities will get a huge boost and get major contracts. And Prime Minister was also mentioning that, Prime Minister Modi, that we have done this in many countries, and we hope to contribute to the concrete building of this IMEC through those means. So, and if you look at the Gulf countries, they are very keen for this as well, because they are also there's a rapprochement between the Arab states and Israel, and all of this is going to be facilitated through IMEC. So, Gulf countries sitting in the middle would want to leverage this in a big way. And you already mentioned we have strong strategic partnerships with them. So, and they may also put in a lot of financing into this. So, it's not only US financing. There are some people asking, will the Americans really pony up and put the money where the mouth is? But all the partners in IMEC are pretty well resourced. So, it's not like there is going to be a lack of funding or a problem with financing. So, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so couple of things first. The first thing, if you remember, when I started out, I said that IMEC and why is it does it have the right ingredients for success is because it is a collaborative project. See, one of the problems why Chinese investments with BRI falter or have started to backfire is because they are not transparent, and then China is the only stakeholder. I mean, when it comes to unilateral financial stakes out there. Okay, so unlike the BRI, which is opaque, which is only spearheaded by China, this is a collaborative project. So you're absolutely on point when you said that there are going to be all these different stakeholders when it comes to that. So that is an important thing to understand. The other important thing to understand is with respect to the Gulf countries, and I think that's my reading of it. By this, the Gulf countries are also trying to change, and India becomes important. I'll tell you how. They are also trying to change this dualistic hierarchy that so far their major security partner was the US and the major economic partner was China. Because for both UAE and Saudi Arabia, China is their topmost trading partners. Now with India now coming here, what they are trying to do is that they are trying to sort of rewrite the geostrategic and geo-economic, so to say, landscape in their region by getting into an economic connectivity project with the US and with India on board. So somewhere, India, they are leveraging, on India's presence in that region. So that is important. The other thing that is important for us is that it is also showing a kind of a pivoting away from Pakistan, because both those countries have had important ties with Islamabad and been considered allies. So, not really, it's not relevant out there at all, but it's a snub, in many ways. And for more importantly, for the European Union now, this really unlocks a lot of potential, because okay, now this is I think something that we need to understand a little better. You talked about the port of Haifa. You talked about Greece. Greece is going to be on board very soon. Why? Because the port of Piraeus in the pathway. Yes. Okay. Now there is a bit of a problem with these ports, because if you remember Haifa, now Haifa has been bought by Adani Group, in India. But in 2021, they had entered into an agreement with China where the operations are held by China, right? So now this is something that you need to iron out, and that is why I think what the Middle Eastern countries, and especially the Gulf countries, would also like to project that this is not really a containment of China or containment of their trade with China, but an alternative. So that's what I said, that at the heart of this is to understand that the global economic order is going to remain more multipolar, is going to become more multipolar. So I think that is important to understand, because how do you then do that? Similarly, if you look at Greece, of the port of Piraeus, for example, now that was the first country in Europe to actually sign up for the BRI. And this particular, the Chinese investments in Piraeus were also hailed as Chinese, so to say, arriving, in Europe. And of course, not to say that there have not been problems. There have been multiple problems in recent times. But what I'm trying to tell you is that all these countries, their interest is not to lessen their trade with China, because that is not on the cards. The idea is to diversify and to de-risk. And that's what the Europeans are also looking at. And
And in fact, the China factor, obviously, the BRI is much senior to IMEC, and it's been there for a decade. They're saying that they have amassed like more than $1 trillion of investment, and they have 150 countries who are signatories. It's a massive thing. So while people are making comparisons, these are somewhat different in the nature and the structure, because that's a very unilateral thing. This is a plurilateral or a multilateral endeavor. Now, you've already come to Europe, and let me take you there. The Europeans are present there both as EU, meaning representing all the 27 member countries, but also the major G7 countries which are there, France, Germany and Italy. The Chinese have made inroads both in the Gulf and in Europe, and they have many formats for engagement with these regions, and including significant investments. The Americans have been trying to dissuade both the Europeans and the Gulf countries to steer clear of China, because as far as the Americans go, China means trouble and it should be countered. But these countries, like you said, probably are pragmatic and want to have it both ways, at least to the extent that they are getting investments and loans from everywhere.
Right.
So to that extent, there is some ambiguity even within IMEC, because some of these member countries also are part of BRI. But end of the day, it does look like over time they seem to be realizing that there is a problem, because the Chinese also are competing with these countries in terms of trade, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of laying networks, for example, for telecommunications and all these things. So maybe there is a re-evaluation of that, and that's also showing in IMEC. We've seen the Italians pulling out of the BRI after they initially joined it.
Yes.
So, and the Italians very enthusiastically participated in the launch of IMEC. So, are they going to be able to, have both of these, or you think ultimately the US will prevail because the US doesn't want any of these countries to do anything with China?
Okay. Now, a lot of things. If you allow me a couple of minutes, I'll probably try to untangle it a little better. So, first things first. The thing is that with respect to the Gulf countries, it's also very futuristic. The beauty of IMEC is that it's also futuristic, because the Gulf countries, what are they known for? They are basically known as energy suppliers to the rest of the world. They are massive OPEC plus countries. So for them, connectivity, becoming part of something, with a different type of an economic, so to say, planning is also a diversification for their long-term economic benefit. Okay, that's one. With the US, first, let's take Europe first and then America. So with Europe, now, of course, there are basically three routes by which China actually got into Europe. Okay, if you remember the the financial crisis in 2008, and that led to a debt crisis, which really hit Greece very badly. And it actually got to be known as the Greek debt crisis and all that. So this was 2008 to 2009, and that was the time when China made inroads into Europe. And then it just in about 3-4 years, China's investment started to really jump by leaps and bounds and all of that. So that was one route, and that is where the port of Piraeus becomes important, because that was one entry point. The other entry point for China was the eastern side of Europe, where they had something called the 17+1 mechanism, which is also running into massive troubles, because the 17+1, countries keep leaving it, and it's become 16 and then 15 and 14+1, and they have problems there with Lithuania. It's a very well-known spat between China and the European Union over Taiwan. And the third was Italy, and it's relevant, and that's why I'm mentioning, because Italy was the first G7 country to actually sign up to the BRI. There was no other, so Germany has massive trade relations with China, France has massive trade relations with China, but they are not signatories to BRI. It was only Italy that had signed up in 2019 to be a partner to BRI. And what happened, Dr. Chaulia, it's very interesting. So from 2019 to 2022, when Italy became a signatory to BRI, Italy's trade deficit with China went up beyond $20 billion, while trade with China grew from $50 billion to $80 billion, but it all went to China's, export advantage. So that is a realization. So when Italy is talking about pulling out from BRI under Giorgia Meloni, what is to be remembered is that they are not talking about cutting down on trade. They want the trade to be more more equal, more fair. Right. And that is one of the problems that, China, when China is in trade relations with other countries, it's mostly China that has having the trade surplus.
Tries to extract the advantages.
Yes.
So viewers, the point is Italy is a signatory to the IMEC, and we are just discussing this. And let's hear the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni talking at the inauguration of IMEC, and she has some very interesting points for us to observe. Let's watch her.
When we launched the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment just over a year ago, we committed to building better infrastructure for better future in low and middle income nations. We committed to cooperate with these nations with an equal, non-predatory approach to create new opportunities and prosperity. Today's launch of the new economic corridor between India and the Middle East and Europe goes precisely in this direction, and is a milestone in strengthening global interconnections. And that is why I want to thank Prime Minister Modi, President Biden, and all the others, Ursula von der Leyen and all the others who made it possible. For it's a very important thing. This will scale up our economy's growth, opening enormous potential for mutual benefits in the business sector. Obviously, Italy is ready to play a decisive role in this process, also through the unique expertise of Italian companies in the maritime and railway sector. And we want to contribute in building bridges between the Mediterranean and the Indo-Pacific, also in the fields of energy and digital connectivity via Africa and the Arabian Gulf.
So, viewers, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, talking about the advantages for Italy to be involved in it, major business contracts for Italian companies, but also she's talking about a non-predatory and equal approach towards trade, which is part of the PGII.
Yeah.
So, we are almost out of time, Dr. Rao, but your thoughts on whether IMEC will indeed live up to this expectation of being a non-predatory model, because the Chinese model has been quite exploitative and unequal. So, the expectation of G7 countries, the Europeans and the America, everybody and India is that this is going to be a non-predatory, something that will spread the benefits in a more fair manner among all the participants. In other words, a more democratic type of corridor as opposed to the authoritarian corridor of China.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I think in my opinion, we've already discussed so many pluses and certain vulnerabilities of the IMEC as well. I think its true strength actually lies in the fact that it can really expand. So, you're looking at Europe, I think eventually you already have in Europe something called a 3 Seas initiative, where they have connected the 3 core seas of Europe, which is the Black Sea, the Adriatic Sea and the Baltic Sea. And eventually when you're reaching all the way to Germany, you know, if there are plans, then you can very easily connect to those, and which are, there are really elaborate mechanisms in place there. So, it makes sense to just sort of connect that to, so that's one. Similarly for India, with perhaps Japan joining in due course, or even if not, but then you can definitely connect it to other initiatives in the Bay of Bengal. Okay, so I think that is one of the core strengths of IMEC, that there is immense potential to expand.
So, confluence of seas, viewers, initially we thought about only Indo-Pacific, but now you heard the Italian Prime Minister and our guest Dr. Swasti Rao also talking about connecting the Mediterranean and the other seas of Europe with the Indo-Pacific. This is, unprecedented. This is big thinking. This is large scale, looking at a map and saying how do we join up all these hitherto less linked places and make them part of one big economic space, one big geopolitical space. So, I want to thank Dr. Swasti Rao for valuable insights as always. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
So, viewers, let's keep our eye on the IMEC ball. This is just taking off. It's going to get bigger and it will significantly remake the geo-economic stakes in our extended neighborhood and beyond. And one would hope that with India's economic engine revving up and growing faster than all other major economies, that India will be able to really benefit from this new regional architecture that we are building. In the past, it has been said that India stays out of regional architecture building and does not join regional cooperation initiatives because of protectionism and fear of being dumped with goods by unfair trade practices. But IMEC does not have China. So, IMEC really is a more promising initiative where we can have more equitable economic stakes and cooperation. So, let's hope for the best for IMEC and continue to focus on it. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.